just as you described, you said that, many people, when they do finally realize that the end is nigh and that they are coming towards the end of their lives, that this does, as you said, in many cases, does seem to, uh, people do, in some cases, they can't even enjoy life more. And I was just wondering if you perhaps had any ideas for the people listening that, perhaps they're not close to the end, but they would like the urgency or the meaning that having that mentality could come with. Are there perhaps any ways or that we could do that, or is it simply the case that we can't trick our mind in that way?
No, we can. And in the past, this was normal. So, for example, it would be normal for a scholar like me sitting at a desk to have, certainly in the 16th, 17th century, to have a skull on my desk. Nothing morbid about it, but it reminds me that I'm not here forever. And another way of remembering death is through religion and its rituals, which do remind one that one is mortal. So I'm not saying that in order to do anything, I'm not here to promote any particular religion, although I think that it's pretty wise to entertain the idea that they may have important elements in them. My goodness. So yes, I think there are things like that, but I think also being aware of what it is we're missing is quite a good practice to sort of think what is going out of my life, and why am I losing it? Why is life becoming more colorless? Why do things seem more dull, more boring, whatever? And one reason is because we're substituting representations all the time for the actual business of experience. So being there, um, to coin a phrase, is rather important. And one way you can do that is through practicing mindfulness and bringing a mindful attitude more and more into your daily life. And what mindfulness is really a way of stilling the ever um, chatting, ever talkative, ever judgmental left hemisphere, saying, "Oh, it's one of those," and yes, and isn't that bad? And I don't want this. And I don't. No, hang on, just let's stop all that chatter, which is called in Eastern mysticism is called monkey mind. Stop that monkey mind, and instead allow oneself to be in the full presence of whatever is there, to appreciate it for what it is, and to find the good in it rather than only see the thing that annoys you, irritates you, or wants you to rebuff it and move away from it. But behind all this is simply an awareness. I'm I'm always asked. I would say I was going to say I'm often asked, but I'm always asked actually. So what do we do? And there is a list of things that I can suggest, like practicing mindfulness, for example. But I think and of course in terms of sorting or trying our best to address, never mind reverse, the damage we are doing to nature and to ancient cultures that have peaceably lived with nature for millennia. Uh, those things need to be done. But very important is that if we don't actually change the way we think, we can't actually move out of this prison of our ego, this tyranny of being ourselves and only ourselves, and feeling that everything revolves around ourselves. If you can let go of that, you've shed a burden and you can enter into a degree of freedom, I think. One of the things I've been thinking about is the paradox, of course. I mean, I write about it in the Master and his Emissary. The paradox that once you've lost the capacity to be intuitively present, once you become a person who is constantly examining your own consciousness, so you're self-conscious all the time, you lose very much. We know that. But the paradox is, once you've got that self-consciousness, how do you get rid of it again? You can only do so, it seems, by an effort, a self-conscious effort to be less self-conscious. Now, although that does sound paradoxical, it's not impossible. And it's really what I mean by being aware of what we're doing, to be aware that I'm constantly trying to inspect what's happening as though somehow it's not really me. I'm not there in the flow. I'm something else. But we are what we are. And when you become too self-conscious, and schizophrenia is an illness in which self-awareness and self-consciousness of a not helpful kind becomes intensified, people no longer are able to do spontaneous acts. For example, even standing up or sitting down, they describe as a problem. They have to think through what are the series of steps I have to do. Now, if you take that single image of trying to stand up or sit down, something we do fluently and unconsciously, if you have to think it through, you don't do it well. Now, there are many things that we know are like this. I mean, if you're just doing something so simple as typing, if you don't think about it, you go fine. Once you watch your fingers, you start making lots of errors. And the same's playing a piece of music. If you're in the flow of it and not thinking about where your fingers are going, you can play it really beautifully as a whole. But when you're thinking about your fingers, they get between you, as it were, and the experience. So one way of thinking about our modern world is that we're consciously trying to analyze everything instead of letting that go and relying more on our intuitions. That's a very important thing, because intuition has lost its status. People are convinced by a band of half-baked psychologists who are going around earning enormous incomes, going to big corporations and telling people not to trust their intuitions. And I mean, not only is this a waste of time and money, but it's actually toxic, because it's through honing one's intuitions that one is capable of making wise decisions. We don't necessarily do better by thinking all the time about things. The unconscious realm is not some murky sort of tank down in the basement. The unconscious realm is where we do most of our living. Only a tiny bit, and it's been estimated at 0.5% of all that's, as it were, known to us through our bodies, taking in information, and to our nervous system as a whole, is actually the stuff that we're conscious of in the spotlight of attention, that left hemisphere spotlight. And coming out of it into consciousness is necessary for to do some things. To write, for example, sometimes to get going, but then you need to let go of it and allow things to come to and through you. So A.N. Whitehead, who's a philosopher I very greatly admire, and I think is probably the greatest philosopher of the last 100 years, makes this point and says that conscious examination is like cavalry charges in battle. So he's writing this around the time of the First World War, which was probably the last time there ever were cavalry charges. But they're like cavalry charges in battle. They can only be made at crucial moments. They require fresh horses, and they shouldn't be what you rely on. They're just a thing that can be brought in at a particular moment. And he made the point that a civilization is actually at its finest before it becomes too self-analytic. And I believe we're now in such a state of self-analysis that we've lost the feeling of the whole. Because when you analyze everything, you break up the whole, and it's from the whole that the meaning comes. I mean, it's very useful to take things apart as a temporary measure. That's what the left hemisphere does. The right hemisphere sees the whole, the Gestalt, German word which simply means a whole that cannot be reduced to parts without significant loss. So the right sees that, and the left hemisphere works on it and breaks it up and categorizes it. That's all fine. But that's not the end of the process. What needs to happen is that needs to come back to seeing the whole again, now enriched by what's happened while we were busy analyzing. But instead, we stay in this fragmented analytic mode, and we look at the the heap of parts that we've generated and think, well, this doesn't mean anything. And an image I sometimes use is that of trying to understand a motorbike. If you want to understand a motorbike, you have to get on and ride it. But if instead you decide the way to understand a motorbike is to find out what it's made of, then you take it apart on the garage floor, and you end up with these heaps of bits and pieces of metal. And you go, well, blimey, I've no idea what this thing is. I've looked at the parts; they don't seem to mean anything. Now, a lot of what we take for science is simply the breaking up of everything and then going, well, search me. It doesn't seem to have any purpose or value. Whereas the purpose and the value lie in the whole. And once you've fragmented it, you've lost its purpose and value.